Welcome to Searching for History.
Today we're going to go look again at some pioneer history. To start, we're going to go look at what's called the Cowlitz Landing. And that's a place where pioneers would come up the Cowlitz River and then land there and then continue their journey north. From there, we're going to go to the town of Toledo, look at the Cowlitz Farm, and then we'll end this video at the Xavier Mission. Cowlitz Landing. At this place, Hudson's Bay Company traders from Puget Sound loaded furs and canoes for transport to the Columbia River in the years 1836 to 1846. Then American settlers came up the river by bateau, barge, and raft. A landing was built on the donation claim of F.A. Clark and a hotel on the adjoining land of E.D. Warbus. American settlers held a convention here in 1851 and petitioned for a new U.S. territory north of the Columbia River. Steamboats came in 1858, and they served the Cowlitz Valley until 1917. So when it says 1836 to 1846, that's basically when Fort Vancouver existed. And so fur traders from further north, like the Puget Sound area and elsewhere, would bring furs down to here over land, and then they would then get in canoes and rafts and take the Cowlitz River down to the Columbia River to Fort Vancouver. Cowlitz Landing was a small town, and it would have been somewhere around here. And it had a hotel and a store. Wow, look at all these old cars. I had no idea. And then it just keeps going. There's tractors and cars and trucks. Look at that old mail Jeep. Plommondon. We just saw Plommondon Road, and I was reading this morning that that's the first settler in southwest Washington, and he settled basically where Toledo is today in 1820, and was the person that established the Cowlitz Farm. We're now entering Toledo. Not Toledo, Ohio, or Toledo, Spain. Toledo, Washington. It's a pretty small town.
has a family Mexican restaurant, though, so you know it's good.
Has a gazebo. August 29th, 1851, a convention held at Cowlitz, 1 mile south, formulated a petition asking Congress to divide Oregon. Acting on this, Washington Territory was created. President Fillmore signed the act March 2nd, 1853. This memorial erected by Washington State Historical Society in 1922. So when they're saying held at Cowlitz, 1 mile south, so that would be Cowlitz Landing. Here's a panel talking about Simon Plamondon. Plamondon was a royal surveyor born in Quebec, Canada in 1800. He established a 40-acre farm on Cowlitz Prairie in 1835. His assessment of that land led to the establishment of a 4,000-acre farm on Cowlitz Prairie, which we're going to go see if we can take a look at that. It's quite a faded informational panel. I think they really need to update it. And then here there's a plaque to a bridge, the Toledo Bridge, dedicated in 1920. Of course, the bridge here today is far newer than that, so I think this represents a bridge that no longer exists. You know, the Cowlitz River is a pretty big river.
You can really envision paddle boats coming up to Toledo, carrying settlers here.
Yeah, so here's an example of the type of paddle wheelers that would come up the river. Captain Orrin Kellogg purchased an acre of ground from the Rochins in 1881 with the purpose of building a warehouse. This warehouse housed products that were transported by steamboats along the Cowlitz River to the Columbia and into Portland. The steamboat's last trips were in 1916 with the building of the Pacific Highway. The Olson brothers purchased the site in the 1920s. In 1890, Mr. and Mrs. E.P. Badger operated the first grist mill. In 1925, Stan and Anna Olson built a home where the grist mill stood. Look at that, that's an older building. That's the City Hall over there. And then this is really the only kind of stretch of older buildings in Toledo. Okay, here's the steamer Toledo. The steamer Toledo made her first run up to what became the town of Toledo in 1879. So this is the Captain Orrin Kellogg's paddle wheeler steamboat. So there's the jail. I don't know anything about it or how old it is, but behind me is what appears to be the Toledo City Jail. Then across there, that's the City Hall. So what do you think of the small town of Toledo?
It's really cute. And I had no idea it was here.
Yeah, maybe years ago I drove through here, but definitely never stopped. All right, well, let's go see if we can find the Cowlitz Farm.
Cool, let's go.
we're out in what's called Cowlitz Prairie, so we're driving through Cowlitz Prairie right now. And so the Cowlitz Farm, the Hudson Bay Company farm, was somewhere out here. It's more or less where the Toledo airport is today. But we're basically driving through the Cowlitz Farm. There's nothing left of it other than just the farmland itself. But it would have been a community out here of sorts. Pretty spectacular out here, and I can see why they chose this as a farm. I mean, it's just quite a large, flat, plain prairie out here. Probably really good farmland. So you had the Hudson's Bay Company, and then what was called the Puget Sound Agricultural Company, which was a subsidiary of the Hudson's Bay Company. And so this was ran by the Puget Sound Agricultural Company, and they grew, fruits and vegetables, produce out here, and then it was shipped to Fort Vancouver, and I think even other Hudson Bay Company posts in the Pacific Northwest, and even used for trade to sell to ships coming in to trade at Fort Vancouver and so forth. Our last stop will be the Catholic Mission up here that was built at the same time the Cowlitz Farm was running. So we're now at the Francis Xavier Mission. It's my understanding that the first church here was a log chapel built in 1839. 40 years later, so 1879, they built an actual church, but that burned down in 1916. And so then what you see behind me, the brick church, was built in 1917. I don't know if I really understand what I'm looking at. Historic Saint Francis Xavier Mission. So apparently that's something called the Catholic Ladder. It explains the course of the Old Testament and the New Testament, basically the history of Christianity through this symbolic ladder. I've never really seen anything like this. December 16, 1838, Francois Norbert Blanchet celebrated Holy Mass for the first time in the Cowlitz Prairie home of Simon Plomadon, also spelled Plomadon. So Father Blanchet laid out 640 acres for the mission. So it's interesting. I wonder if there's actually a donation land claim here for the mission. We'll have to look that up. I read that there was several schools here over the years since the mission was created. You have a school for girls, nuns lived here. There was an order of Franciscan sisters that lived here at one point, and then also Franciscan monks. It's basically been a Catholic presence here since 1838. And then this is the Associated Cemetery. Here's a gravestone from 1883. Here, look at the detail on here. 1875. Annie, wife of S. Plant, died May 7th, 1875. Unfortunately, had 27 years. Came from Ireland. Well, Erin, what do you think about our journey today with Cowlitz Landing and Toledo, and the Cowlitz Farm, and now the mission?
I feel like my map of all of the ways that people settled in this area is piecing together slowly. So this is another piece of that puzzle. I'm kind of shocked at how large this mission complex is. not just with the cemetery and a church, but several schools, several different iterations of schools. It's pretty amazing.
And to think that originally it encompassed 640 acres. So what we see here today is quite smaller than what it originally was.
Yeah.
Well, before we go, should we see if we can go inside the church?
At least one of us should.
I'm glad we came down to Toledo and looked at these sites. It definitely provides an understanding of how settlement looked after this territory became United States territory. And then Oregon territory was split in half, and so now we're in Washington territory. It's pretty interesting history.
Don't forget to like, share, comment on this video, and please subscribe to Searching for History.
Thanks for watching.